Hello and welcome to Take Two, the programme that takes a second look at the big issues. I'm Ian Henshall. Today we have reports from Roy Hunter on world public opinion and from Fran Anderson on education. But first, here are some news reports. Germany fails to get its gold back. Peter Boehringer is a German-based gold expert and he's campaigning for the return of Germany's gold, most of which is in the US for safekeeping. And he's not happy. After years of campaigning, Germany finally produced a timetable for the partial return of Germany's gold. But now the German Bundesbank reports they've only received some 37.5 tonnes, less than half, planned for 2013. Not only that, but what they did receive was recast in New York. This makes the gold untraceable. Gold analysts are asking, why has there not been an audit for 50 years of the massive amounts of gold supposedly held safely in the US? Why has the Bundesbank provided no evidence linking the gold received to the original gold bars? Why recast the bars in New York when there are state-of-the-art facilities in Frankfurt? While the media are maxing out on the supposed collapse in the gold price, for people like Lars Schall, the journalist who obtained the admission that gold was recast, there is an altogether different issue. Many suspect that the US banking community has been as negligent with the gold they hold as they have been with everything else lately. To put it bluntly, the fear is that bankers have run a fractional reserve system like they do with people's savings, lending out the gold and hoping that depositors do not want their gold back at the same time. So long as most people trust them, they can get away with it. But if people stop trusting them, there will be a stampede into physical gold. We're not advising anybody to buy physical gold, but we would advise you to check on just what sort of gold you think you have. The banksters say gold is old-fashioned, but for many people it's more trustworthy than a New York banker. New York Times backs calls for amnesty for Snowden. More evidence that the deck chairs on the US Titanic are indeed being rearranged. Not only did Congress decline to be driven into another war in Syria in 2013, but sentiment is shifting towards the whistleblower Edward Snowden. Even the New York Times, the so-called paper of record that promoted the fake evidence triggering the criminal invasion of Iraq, seems to have discovered its conscience. Alternatively, a cynic might say they have finally realized that the Washington police state threatens them too. Anyway, the Times is saying that Snowden has been vindicated, first by President Obama's panel, which confirmed that Washington's snooping had reached Orwellian proportions, and second by two federal judges who have found the NSA in breach of the US Constitution. And this is what the New York Times said. Considering the enormous value of the information he has revealed and the abuses he has exposed, Mr. Snowden deserves better than a life of permanent exile, fear and flight. He may have committed a crime to do so, but he has done his country a great service. It is time for the United States to offer Mr. Snowden a plea bargain or some form of clemency that would allow him to return home, face at least substantially reduced punishment in light of his role as a whistleblower. Well, setting aside the usual establishment doublethink, why should someone who is exposed to appalling wrongdoing serve any time at all in prison? This is still a big wobble in the normally rock-solid Washington line. And there's another coming up too in the next item. NSA admits spying on Congress. In response to questions from dissidents in Congress, the NSA has stated that it has the right to spy on Congress. This is perhaps not so much of a surprise since Edward Snowden told us as much from his personal experience on the inside, but it does remove any doubt. One question follows immediately. What would the NSA be intending to do with the legislators' stolen privacy? Oddly, The Guardian, in a recent special supplement on the Snowden affair, entirely omitted what everyone else on the street will think is obvious: to use personal information to blackmail Congress. And if not the NSA, then what about the political party that controls it through occupancy of the White House? Well, the NSA have issued a craftily worded statement that might read like a threat to a worried congressman having an affair or taking bribes. Here it is. Listen carefully. We will continue to work to ensure that all members of Congress have information about the NSA's mission, authorities and programs to fully inform the discharge of their duties. Well, that's the news items. Next we'll have Roy Hunter on an astonishing global opinion poll, which has largely been unreported in the mainstream media.
Hi, Ian. Yeah, the results are quite revealing and gratifying for those of us who have long felt that the Western powers, and the US in particular, are at the forefront of aggressive militarism and deliberate policy of destabilisation across the planet in order to impose their agenda of corporate and military dominance. I mean, this opinion seems to be widely shared. The US are undoubtedly the world leader in exporting aggression in the mind of the world's populace. There's 24% name them as the greatest threat to peace in the world today. That was the question they were asked. Coming in a not very close second at all on 8% was Pakistan. Third was China with 6%. Then equal fourth with 5% come Afghanistan, Iran, Israel and North Korea. Russia comes in at a lowly 2%. I think they must try better. The UK comes in at 1%, which in my opinion is a triumph of public relations, really. A few surprises turned up in the statistics. Only 3% of the French people, that's 26 people out of a sample of 995, thought that America were the greatest threat to world peace, which, if you think back to the circumstances of the invasion of Iraq, that's quite amazing, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
I don't know the reasoning behind that. There must have been a big propaganda campaign in France, really, to change public opinion.
French media is very controlled.
Is it? Yeah, I don't really know very much about that, to be honest with you. And I couldn't find very much information on it. But unsurprisingly, I suppose, the French see Syria as the biggest threat, though I think it's very flattering for Assad to be seen as the biggest threat to world peace.
Doesn't even control his own country.
No, that's right. But, other surprises were it seems that only one person out of 685 people polled in Poland, only one person thought the US was the biggest threat to world peace. And I think that must be my friend Oleg, who went back last year.
You're spreading the word, right?
Yeah. But taken as a subset, 19% of Europeans thought, 25% of Asians, 28% of North Africans, and 31% of Latin Americans thought that America were the biggest threat to world peace. So, the whole globe really is basically on this.
Well, it's interesting that in the old days of the Cold War, everybody that you met thought that, we were peaceful, but there was a threat from Moscow, from the Soviet Union.
Yeah.
And, people really believed that they might invade us.
Yeah.
Whether that's any truth in that, I had no idea. I'd rather think not. But now it seems to be like flipped over. And also, we beamed truthful propaganda, if there's such a thing, into America. The voice of America was what everybody listened to in Eastern Europe. Yeah. Whereas now it's getting increasingly Russia Today.
Yeah, we're listening to Russia Today.
That's beaming in the truth, or their version of the truth.
Yeah. So now only 2% see Russia as the biggest threat to world peace.
2%, well, it's probably about right.
Quite amazing, yeah. Another surprising statistic was 13% of Americans, 13% of the American public actually thought that the US was the greatest threat to world peace.
So whatever people say about the Americans, their public are actually in many ways a lot more sceptical than the average Brit or Frenchman or Canadian.
Well, 3% of French thought that the US were the biggest threat, and 13% of the US thought that they were.
And I wonder how many French thought that France was the biggest threat to world peace, which they are. In the Middle East, they have actually been something of a threat to peace. They led the bombing of Libya. They've been leading the attack on Syria. I wonder how many French, and we don't know.
I haven't got that number with me, but
it'd be interesting to know.
It would be interesting to know, yeah. But I think, to me, this is great news, really. I think I think it's quite legitimate to actually demonise America, really. I think I'm not saying they're to blame for this whole, for everything in the world at all, and I do believe actually that Britain's quite mixed up with this. If you've seen the film The Empire of the City, they assert in there that that London controls the financial part of the world domination. America's the military, and the Vatican Cities looks after the spiritual thing, you know. So,
right.
and I do believe that Britain's just as complicit as America, really. But I think America's the visible face, really, of the out of control capitalist system. And
well, when people say America, it can mean anything, can't it? It can mean anything from, you know, the Republican Party or the Federal Reserve, depending on who you think really controls it. And we're always being asked to say, well, do you think it's the Vatican or do you think it's Washington?
Sure,
And my answer is always, so long as they're operating in secret, it's pretty hard to tell. It's a sort of class thing, really, isn't it?
I think it is those elites.
There's a 1% elite.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And within that, there's a 0.1% who've apparently been earning all the money, not even the 1%. So.
But although it is a little unfair to blame all this on America, I think they're the visible face. I think they're the visible face of it, and I think it's quite legitimate that we can demonise them, really.
Well, you can see Washington as a sort of non-American city. I mean, lots of Americans do. They see Washington as being like a sort of alien occupation force in a way, and there is a little bit of truth in that.
Well, we have the City of London, don't we? Within Greater London, you have the City of London, which seems to have its own laws, its own police force, and very few people who work in the City of London seem to get prosecuted for any crimes at all. Which we know about.
Well, it's as the old saying went, you know, one law for the rich, another for the poor, and that is actually literally quite an accurate saying. There's another poem about people stealing the sheep from the common. I don't know if you know that one. I'm sure your viewers.
They hang the man and beat the woman who steals the goose from off the common. But let the bigger villain go who steals
the common from the goose.
Let's the bigger villain loose who steals the common from the goose. That's right.
Which is, of course, a reference to the enclosures when they literally stole the common land from the people. And if I remember my history right, that was the so-called liberal aristocrats who did that, not the Tories. And of course, many people would say that the Liberals are just as hypocritical today as they were then. Well, thanks very much, Roy. That's interesting, and no doubt we'll hear your opinion about world opinion in a future show. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Cheers.
Hello, this is Take 2 and I'm Ian Henshall. Next we look at the shocking survey of standards of education across 24 countries. England and America are near to bottom of global league tables for basic skills. About 166,000 adults in 24 countries were tested for educational skills by the OECD, the Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development, in November 2013. As with previous global surveys on pupils' educational skills, England and America came close to the bottom and were again beaten by South Korea, Estonia, Poland, Canada and Australia. Skills tested were numeracy, literacy and computer skills. English pupils aged 16 to 24 ranked 22nd for literacy and 21st for numeracy, coming just 1 or 2 points ahead of America. The test found 25% of adults in England had maths skills of a 10-year-old. The OECD warns that young people's skills in America and England are likely to further decline, adversely affecting the economy, unless action is taken to reverse this trend. Well, here I've got in the studio Fran Anderson. Hello, Fran. Fran investigated this, and what do you reckon of this OECD survey, Fran?
Critics argue that the OECD sample was too small and only some regions in a particular country were included, and cultural linguistic differences were ignored. One language might be easier to learn than another's, so some countries omitted special needs pupils from the survey as well and only included top performing schools. However, the survey did indicate that for England and America, socio-economic background and poverty were strong factors determining pupils' proficiency levels.
What's the UK's response to this OECD survey and the alleged lack of skills in young people?
Well, every new government blames the last one and introduces new policy changes which creates instability. The present UK government believes in privatisation and in a return to old-fashioned methods such as exams, more tests, learning by rote, less coursework assessment and more classroom time. Semi-privatised academies and free schools have opened, with claims that they will improve educational standards. The Conservatives want every school to become an academy or free school. Central government funds go to the free schools and academies instead of local council controlled funds. But these academies and free schools are independently run. Theoretically, anyone can apply to open a free school, but in practice, it's businesses, universities, faith groups, and a few rich parents. And any school can become an academy.
So, are free schools a good idea?
The government paints a rosy picture of free schools and academies, claiming it's not about ideology. However, BBC's Newsnight and the Anti-Academies Alliance and the teachers' unions and many others point it to being all about ideology. So here are some facts. There's no choice. Schools are forced to become academies. Even when parents don't want their local school changed to an academy, the government forces it through, as happened in London at Down Hills Primary School. David Wolfe, education barrister, described this as undemocratic, and this was substantiated by a YouGov survey showing only 19% of parents support academies and free schools. And Catherine Edwards, a parent, has blogged, in quotes, "Forcing schools to become academies makes me wonder whether I live in a democracy anymore. This is privatisation using unaccountable, corrupt and predatory brokers deploying lies and intimidation." And then when we look at the funds, academies and free schools receive more state funds than local authority schools who are suffering budget cuts, creating unfairness. A survey in 2011 by the Association of School and College Leaders showed schools applied for academy status for financial, not for educational reasons. Improving standards. Even the centre-right think tank Civitas acknowledges that academies are inadequately academic. Professor Terry Wigley, editor of the journal Improving Schools, says excessive use of vocational equivalents has been inflating results of England's academies. And school inspectors Ofsted found that 69% of state secondaries were related good or outstanding, but only 52% of sponsor-led academies. And when we look at pay and conditions, some head teachers pay themselves an inflated salary, whilst teachers' pay and conditions are undermined. The Times Education Supplement reports some academies require staff to be available during school holidays, while others put no upper limit on working hours. And then there's the cost to the taxpayer. According to the Financial Times, academies with financial problems cost over £11 million. 81 free schools have received £60 million in funding for their first year, including 10 free schools who even failed to open. The Academies of Free Schools project has overspent by £1 billion. And then when we look at school places, many academies fail, whilst local authorities are banned from opening new schools, resulting in less school places, not more. Free schools open where they like, leading to 45% of new schools opening in London rather than where places are actually needed. And then look at unofficial exclusion, which was uncovered by BBC Two's Newsnight. Pupils from poor backgrounds and with special needs are deemed likely to lower the school's position in league tables, and these pupils are neglected and encouraged to change to a local authority school. And whilst the Children of Founders programme allows wealthy parents to ensure their children are admitted, so the admission policy is all squint. So it's all about ideology. Conservatives believe that competition for who can provide the best education at the cheapest price will lead to improved standards. But this belief is proved wrong. In Sweden, with their free schools programme, privatisation just brought chaos. Swedish Education Minister Bertil Östberg said, "We have seen a fall in the quality of Swedish schools since free schools were introduced. Most of our free schools have ended up being run by companies for profit." And then when we look at the effects of this in the UK, there's an emerging three-tier education system: private schools for the rich elite, generous funding for free schools and academies, and underfunded state schools.
State schools, but aren't there problems with state schools as well?
Yes, in most British schools, children endure constant tests, even at young ages. Children are drilled to pass a test rather than understand what is actually being taught. UK doctors are seeing patients as young as 8 suffering anxiety due to fear of tests. And Janice Long, a parent, says, "My children say all they are taught is to memorise facts, predicted to be in exams. It's boring for kids as well as teachers." And then when we look at the bureaucracy, there's endless form filling, taking time away from teaching. Consequently, there's little time for unmeasurables such as thinking, discussing, questioning. They've discarded the professionalism of the teachers and treat them like workers on the production line, said one anonymous teacher. And then this thing about stuck in classrooms. Children are stuck behind desks with very few outside visits or activities. Outside activities require forms, parents' permission slips and risk assessments, and a trip may be abandoned if there's just one special needs pupil requiring expensive extra support. So the government agrees that outdoors activities are beneficial to the pupils, but it's empty rhetoric. As the BBC found, over 95% of outdoors activities have had funding withdrawn.
What about the countries that do well? Can't we learn something from them?
If we want a better education system, we need a fairer society. Children's basic needs must be met first. They can't concentrate if they are hungry or cold or their schools are cold. School meals need to be nutritious and not junk food. They have state-funded nurseries or help for stay-at-home parents. Children start education at 7, smaller class sizes, no more than 20, and shorter school days than Britain and America. Subsidised healthy school meals, free school books, outdoors activities and visits, and no constant tests and less bureaucracy. Instead of copying America, which does badly in league tables, isn't it logical to copy top-performing countries such as Finland?
Yeah. Well, are there alternatives that exist without going to the free schools for people who don't want to be in the state system?
Yes, there's Montessori schools, Steiner schools, or parents can educate children themselves. In the UK, there's Education Otherwise that has useful tips on this. Many educational philosophers advocated more child-centred education and warned against constant tests, from Plato, Socrates to Rousseau, Montessori, Ivan Illich, Holt and many more. They say, encourage children to ask questions, to think and reason for themselves, make learning fun and meaningful. Education can't be seen out of context of society, so educated citizens make informed choices and make a democracy healthy.
Well, thanks very much, Fran. One wonders if there's a deliberate plan to dumb down and stop people's capability for thinking critically about not only their own lives, but about the system, which isn't that friendly to the ordinary people any longer, perhaps. Well, thanks very much anyway. I'm sure we'll be doing more about that again. Well, that's it for this programme, and we'll be back again in a week. Thanks very much to the People's Voice for screening us, and thank you for watching.